don't think we should be recording this story. Which camera? Many years ago, I had started working with the Chevra Kadisha in Brooklyn and Staten Island, and during 2020, I moved to Miami due to a lot of the restrictions and the closures that were going on in New York, but I continued to do some of the Chevra Kadisha work down in Miami. There was a gentleman, his name was Moshe, don't know him, never met him personally, and he was 82 years old. He had a heart condition, and it seemed that he was having some form of palpitations or a heart attack, and so he called paramedics, and the paramedics arrived at his home, and being that they were afraid of the coronavirus, they were afraid to even service him, and they went back and forth, and they really didn't give him the oxygen he needed, and lo and behold, within a few minutes, they took him out. He was huffing and puffing his last few breaths, and he subsequently died that day. This fellow, Moshe, ended up getting buried in Miami, in the cemetery, but there were a lot of restrictions for how many people could have come to the cemetery. So, he hardly had a minyan. I think he got a minyan. Maybe, I think there was 13 people that came to the gravesite, and they ended up burying him. Now, the rule was in Miami that every body that had to be buried, they would put them into a plastic with a zipper. The plastic was very thick because they didn't want the virus spreading, and they were concerned about a lot of the issues. Now, anyone knows Miami. Miami is extremely humid and hot, and a lot of the bodies, especially when they're put in bags like this, deteriorate very, very quickly. The smell, the composition, and a lot of things deteriorate much quicker. But lo and behold, we had to get this done. Gets buried in the Miami cemetery. About 30 days after he passed away, he comes to his wife in a dream, and he asks his wife a couple of questions, but the main one he asks her is why is he buried in Miami? So this guy Moshe and his wife Nina, they actually both bought kevadim in Eretz Israel. But due to Corona and a lot of the restrictions of flying and going from place to place, and especially moving bodies, it was very difficult to move the body from Miami to Israel. And at the time, really it was the New York office and the coroner's office in New York City that were really the main location to move bodies to Israel. So a lot of the places throughout the United States, if they wanted to move bodies to Israel, they would send it to New York. It would go through the process there, and then from there it would get sent to Israel. But this guy Moshe his family couldn't get the thing together, and he only had one son, David. So he ended up getting buried in Miami. And he asked his wife, what is he doing in Miami? So his wife, saw him in the dream. She thought of it, but she didn't think much of it. But lo and behold, he came again. About a week or so later, he comes again to her in a dream, and he again tells her, why did you bury the body in Miami? The body is supposed to be in Israel. We bought these kevadim plots together so that we can be in Eretz Israel. And so she ended up asking her son. Her son is a Rav. He's a Rav in Miami, and he's a Talmid Hacham. So she mentions it to him, and he kind of didn't take it too seriously. But he said, okay, whatever, he'll deal with it. But Moshe, the one who passed away, was deceased. He kept on coming back to his wife Nina, and he kept on telling her, you're not supposed to have buried the body in Miami. It had to have gone to Israel. So he ended up going to make some phone calls, and he asked a couple of the Rabbanim in Israel. He asked Rabbi Ben Zion Musafi and a few others, and I guess the way he asked the question initially, they quickly brushed off and told him, no, you can't move bodies, it's not so simple, you don't just do that. So he kind of put it aside. But the guy Moshe kept coming back again and again to his wife in the dream, telling her he's not supposed to be in Miami. They bought the plot in Israel, he has to go to Israel. So after almost like 2.5 years of coming constantly to dreams to his wife decided to take it very seriously, and the son took it seriously, and they ended up going to a dayan in Eretz Israel, from a Beit Din, and they got psak halacha, and they ended up doing what's called an interment. Interment is where they take the body out of the ground, and they end up moving it to another location. Happens to be, it's siman Shulchan Aruch, there's halachot on it, it's a process, the halacha talks about it, and it's not an issue, it's been done countless times. So they ended up taking the body to Israel. They did the interment. This was already 3 years later at this point. And the son didn't go. The son didn't go to Israel. He stayed in Miami, but the wife Nina did. So they end up bringing the body to Israel, and they end up going to Har HaMenuchot and to do the Kibbutz. While they're doing the Kibbutz, the Chevra Kadisha in Har HaMenuchot are rushing the ceremony, and the group and the family is kind of like trying to say, like, what are you rushing? It's been 3 years since this gentleman passed away. What are you rushing? And the Chevra Kadisha is looking at them and saying, what do you mean? This is a heavy body. So initially, what was thought is that maybe the body got mixed up. It happens. I hate to say it, but sometimes these things happen, and the bodies can sometimes get mixed up from the plane. When they get to Har HaMenuchot, there's a lot of things going on, and they usually identify it before it gets buried, but it could have been. So it was a little confusing because, 3 years, especially in a bag in the ground in Miami, I mean, there was not going to be anything there, and the smell was going to be disgusting. But the Chevra Kadisha is saying, no, this body is very heavy, and it's complete, and it can't, there must be a mix-up. They do an identification, and they end up opening up the bag, and they check and see, and lo and behold, it is Moshe. It's Moshe Melamed, the guy who had passed away, 82 years old. And the body is shalem. It's complete. The body is warm, hair perfect, no smell, no worms, and this is in the ground for 3 years in a plastic bag with the humidity in Miami. And I can tell you from experience that bodies deteriorate pretty quickly and they smell pretty quickly. After a couple of days, especially a week, things happen, there's Yom Tovs, things go around. It's not so simple, and bodies deteriorate. And here, it's 3 years, and there's a shalem body. So at the moment, the Chevra Kadisha, they were shocked and they were scared. And the Chevra Kadisha and Har HaMenuchot, I hate to say this, it's like an operation of the mafia. You can't do anything you want there. You can't move things. You can't put things. Everything is run. It's very, very strict. They're very, very tough over there. More tough than probably any other place in the world. So they end up doing the internment. But before they buried him there, they were so scared, they ended up calling the grandson of Chacham Ovadia Yosef. His name is Chacham Ovadia Yosef Toledano. He's a Dayan in the Beit Din of Rav Asher Weiss. And they invited him there just to come quickly and see it, and see what was going on. And when he had seen it, he told them, you have to write on the kever, lo shalta bo rima, which means on this body, worms did not come or touch the body. And they end up burying him, and that's the end of the story. But not just yet. I was in Miami. I'd come back to Deal, New Jersey, and after the summer, I got very intrigued about this. As a businessman who loves to learn Torah, and very intrigued about the dynamics of the world and how things are, I was very intrigued about this case because I had never seen a body that never deteriorated, never saw a body that was a week old that didn't smell. And I could tell you that from burying some quite important people to society, that their bodies did deteriorate and it did smell. And so I was kind of thinking, like, what's going on here? So after the summer, I fly out back to Miami, and I call David Melamed. His mother, Nina, lives with him. And I asked David if I could stay by him for a couple of days in his house. I came over, I slept in his house, and I asked him if he could, show me around. He showed me around the house. And I asked the wife, you got to tell me about your husband. Who was he? So she tells me, look, until he was about 52 years old, he was a regular guy. He wasn't religious, wasn't observant. He was a Baal Tshuva and in his 50s. And he was a regular businessman. He had like taxi medallions. I think he had like 20 or 30 taxi medallions. So he was kind of managing them. And he had a good income, but wasn't rich. He lived a simple life. And I looked around the house. I was like, no, I'm like, you got to give me something about this person. I'm like, you got to tell me what was important to him. Was he a Baal Tzedakah? She says, no. I said, were you guys big on Hachnasat Orchim or something? She goes, no, not necessarily. I said, did he do any chesed that you know about? She says, no. And I'm looking around the house, and I'm looking, and it's not like the guy's got like a big library of Sifarim. He had a Chok L'Yisrael, Tehillims. I don't think there was a full set of the Shas in his house. Very, very simple guy. And I couldn't understand, how could a guy that's so simple, from what the description is, not have a body to deteriorate after 3 years in our time today. It's not like, I'm not telling you a story that's from a book from hundreds of years ago. So I end up doing a hardcore investigation for the next 4 days. I asked around in all the shuls. I asked people that knew him. I went to the rabbanim, his rabbis, that had known him, and no one really had anything to say much about him that was really peculiar or interesting or anything of that nature. And after further and further investigation, I did discover he was makpid in one thing. This guy Moshe was makpid that from the time that he was a Baal Teshuvah, he never spoke in shul. And he was very makpid about this. He's a Baal Teshuvah. He took it seriously, this whole Teshuvah movement. You know how the Baal Teshuvah guys are sometimes, and he took it very seriously. He couldn't understand how anyone could talk during shul, I could talk on the phone during shul. He was very makpid, so much so that when he was in his 50s, came one time someone from Israel, he had a big hat, long beard, and he saw the guy talking during Kaddish. So after the tefillah, he went over to him, he said, I don't understand. I saw you talking during Kaddish, and I learned that, you're not supposed to talk during the tefillah and during Kaddish. Why'd you speak? Now, this guy with the big beard and the hat, he didn't know that this guy was Baal Tshuva from a few years before. And he embarrasses him, says, who do you think you are? He goes, what do you know? He goes, and if I had a chance, he goes, I would take a stick right now and bang it on top of your head and smash it right on top of you. The guy Moshe was like shocked. Like he was looking up, to this individual and suddenly trying to ask him to understand. And suddenly, came an attack, and it was a big bizayon for him. But he didn't say anything. He teared up a little bit, and he ended up leaving the shul. And for like a few weeks later, he ended up going to shul. But time and time again, we sometimes try to emulate. We try to emulate Gdolim and those that we see, that society see as Elyonim. And we don't know who's Elyonis means someone who's high, supreme. We don't know in the Shamayim who is the Elyonim and who's the Tachtonim. And this guy Moshe, it was a simple guy. I want to show you a little bit about this guy. I'm going to show you a picture. First, this is the picture of this guy Moshe. Let's see you see. Moshe was a regular guy, clean shaven, nothing special, regular peot. And when they had buried him, on his kever, you can see it, it's in Hara Menuchot, you see Moshe Melamed, and it says, Lo shalta bodima ad shehu ba'al lemenuchat olamim be'eretz HaKodesh. After 3 years, he passed away in Hey Tafshin Pei Gimel. Now, I can tell you, if you think that anyone could write whatever they want on a kever in Hara Menuchot, you'll be up for a big surprise if you thought that. They're very, very strict about what could be written, and they ended up putting it here. Now, the reason I say this is tonight is the yahrzeit of the Tosfot Yom Tov. The Tosfot Yom Tov of Yom Tov Lipman Heller Halevi. And during the years of Tachvetat, 1648 and 1649, the Cossacks in Ukraine killed hundreds of thousands of Jews. And the important component about how they killed the Jews was that they had no weapons of mass destruction. The Ukrainians, the Cossacks, they manually and they brutally killed the Jewish people by hand. They didn't have weapons. There were no guns. And you can imagine the brutality. And the Tosfot Yom Tov did what's called the She'elat Halom, and he wanted to know from the Shamayim, why was all of this happening? And lo and behold, they revealed to him for a simple reason, because they converted the shuls into their places of talk, cheap talk, and they desecrated the shuls by talking nonsense and stupidity during the tefillah, during the kaddish, the kiddusha, during the Torah. And it was because of this speaking in the shul that all the destruction came. And it was from this that Tosfot Yom Tov made the famous Yehi Ratzon that everyone has probably seen. They say that when they open the Torah, that anyone who's silent during the tefillah is going to have a lot of beracha and a lot of haslacha. The reason I say this is that a lot of times we're going through life, especially as Orthodox Jews, and we're always looking to do more, to acquire more, learn more, do more siyumim, and finish more. And almost like we think that the religion is a business. We think that, like in the Shamayim, they're going to count all these things as like a business, but it's not. We know that the Gemara tells us that Hamana li babae, God wants your heart. That's all He wanted. And you can see from this gentleman Moshe, a simple guy that went through simple life, but did one thing. He was makpid on not talking in shul. and it protected his body from the natural elements from being deteriorated. And I could tell you, the guy lived a pretty full life, 82 years old. He was very healthy. He generally did really well, and you can see it's a kal vachomer. If after he passed away, his body didn't deteriorate, kal vachomer, when he was alive, his body didn't go through hardship. And you can see from here, such a simple thing, such a simple thing. And I always think about this. How could someone claim that they want to have the Beit HaMikdash and want to come serve Hashem in the Beit HaMikdash and bring korbanot, if in the place that you call the Mikdash Me'at, the small one, you don't even have the fear that God is present? It says, "Umikdashi tira'u," that you have to fear my home, my presence. And we see this constantly. And we see this mitzvah that sometimes is not taken in the strongest capacity. So we learn from this guy Moshe something special, something unique, and it's not something that is far-fetched, someone that you don't know. It's a story that we witnessed. It's a story that many witnesses had seen. You can go to the Kibbutz Eretz Yisrael. It's I'll give you the location so you can go pray by it. It's right here. It's Moshe Melamed ben Netanel ve'ora Shimsi. He passed away in Kaf Tet Adar, 29 Adar. The Kibbutz Har HaMenuchot, Givat Shaul, Chelka Darom, Gush 4 Aleph, Shura 41, Mispar HaKeved 5. So it's that easy. You want to get all the berachot of the Torah? It's as simple as coming to shul and not speaking. So much so that you're not going to hear this too much from the pulpit rabbis. But if a person knows that he can't control himself, he's going to go to shul talking, he's going to start playing on his phone, he's not going to be able to focus, he should pray at home. He's better off praying at home than coming to shul and desecrating the Mikdash Me'at by speaking during Kaddish and during Kedusha. Because if you pray at home, you're going to pray B'yachid, you won't have the avon of doing this, and you'll be just fine. But I'm recommending you come to shul, and that you pray in shul, but that you be silent. And this is a protection, that'll be a protection for you, for your body, for your children, grandchildren, all of your families. And I tell this all the time. It's the easiest segula, just to say silent. And when I mean silent, I mean silent. I could imagine if someone were to go to a traffic court and have a ticket by a local DMV. I want to see them go into the DMV court and start talking in front of the judge and see what happens. Why when in a DMV court or in a traffic court, is there so much fear? But suddenly when they go into the Beit HaKnesset, everyone thinks it's their home. They think because they put a plaque on the wall with their name on, suddenly they have ownership rights. It don't work that way. And in the Shamayim, they don't care whose name and what plaque that you came on. You have to be silent when you're coming into the shul. This is the only form of fear that you truly show of the Borei Olam, because you're coming to at the only time and the only place that you invite the Shekhinah to come pray, and you're coming there and you're speaking. It's the biggest desecration in Chilul Hashem that could be done. And we see that you can get the most beracha from just staying silent during the tefillah. It's the biggest segula, the biggest beracha for protection of your body, of your health, of your well-being, of your money, of your parnasah, of your children, your grandchildren. And so simple, by just staying silent in shul.